So we have to do AM Talk. It's brought to you by Golden Sunbeam International. And Golden Sunbeam International is enrolling students for the new academic year starting September. They provide you with quality yet affordable education for your ward, right from crèche to senior high school. Think no further as where to enroll your ward. Enjoy 20% discount on registrations now to July 31. Make sure you call the following number: 020-1734780 or 0244-575751. Golden Sunbeam. We train leaders, others train the rest. Well, let's introduce our guest this morning. And Patrick Yalbuama is Deputy Minister, Water and Sanitation, but also Member of Parliament for Okankwe Central. Thanks for joining me, Patrick.
Thank you. Good morning.
And he's also in the studio with Samuel Nati George, and he's Member of Parliament for Ningo Pram Pram. Good morning. Thanks for joining.
Let me officially lodge a complaint against my Member of Parliament. Patrick Buama is my Member of Parliament. And all since this parliament began, he's not giving me cocoa money. He's not paid my child's school fees.
Do you pay? Do you
pay? And so I'm lodging my complaint here against my MP.
I hear you.
So MP, I'm going to come to the house in the morning for cocoa money.
Do you pay everybody who is in your constituency?
Is that his responsibility to be paying people's school fees? So people from Ningo Pram Pram go to St. George for your school fees.
They've been coming already.
St. George. Good morning. He lives in my constituency. I check on him every morning.
Oh, okay.
He's covered.
But as for that one, let me commend my MP. My MP checks on my security every morning. When he's going jogging, he stops in my house to ask, is St. George okay?
Jogging again.
He goes jogging, but unfortunately, or fortunately, in our area is not the Intrabuase.
But talking about the Intrabuase, we know that there have been some arrests that have been made. I have to start with you on the subject. But since the incident happened, we haven't spoken, I should say, on the subject. Your thoughts, summarily, and also the arrests that have since ensued by the police service.
Thank you very much. Good morning to your viewers. The incident that occurred in the Intrabuase is the most barbaric incident that has occurred in this country within the last 20 years. I must say that it's very unfortunate. I know the area very well. It's a cocoa growing area. I've been there a couple of times. But for the residents there to have committed such an act, it's so sad, and I don't think anybody should support such a callous activity by Ghanaians, of whether in Intrabuase or any part of this country. I was here that day when the incident happened. We all condemned it, and I must commend the police high command, the military high command, for taking the necessary steps to arrest the suspects, and I know they've been put before court for due process to be followed. Question is, if the system did not respect the due process, they would have been sent to the firing range. So if the late Major had even done something wrong, was that the way to subject him to? They have been put before court for them to tell their story. Why didn't they allow the Major to tell his story? It shows how wicked these people are, and the law must deal with them ruthlessly. I must commend the President for honoring his pledge as Commander-in-Chief, promoting the Major posthumously, listening to the family of the late Major, supporting them, setting up a fund, making a personal donation, erecting a monument in his honor at a place for him to be remembered, and everything that the military has to do, they are doing. He's going to be giving a state burial on Friday. We all will be there to give the family the needed support. It's a very unfortunate situation, and I think it must mark the end of this illegal mob injustice, which has taken place in this country for some time now, but enough is enough, and I think it must end somewhere. Thank you.
Your comments, because subsequently the president has announced that a fund has been set up. Sustainability of such funds also we have to call into question.
Well, let me say a very good morning to our viewers and to yourself and my MP. I subscribe wholly to the comments that have been made by my colleague Honorable Boama, that there is the need for us to have a certain introspection. The actions that took place in the Boase last Monday, or 2 Mondays ago, are despicable and regrettable. I believe that even your worst enemy should not go that way. There is no justification for it. For me, my biggest worry now, I mean, irrespective of whatever we do, we will never bring Captain Mahama or Major Mahama back. However, the wife and 2 young children, they are my biggest concern now. I engaged with the Deputy Minister for Communication in the current government, Honorable George Anda, and he assured me of steps that government was taking, because at this point in time, these kids are pretty young and they really don't understand and comprehend what is going on. But imagine these children in class 5 or class 6, 10 years down the line, and the internet never goes to bed. These videos of how their father died, someone, somewhere, some way, somehow would show this video to these children. And you can imagine what psychologically will happen to these children. It will scar them, it can radicalize them, it could do all sorts of things to the children. And that is why, for me, my primary concern, aside all the various wonderful and laudable things we're doing, is to work with international agencies like Facebook and YouTube to see how well, or Google, to see how well we can deal with those videos and take those videos off the web, because it's the only way to guarantee a semblance of normality for the children as they grow up. I mean, the young wife, she's scarred for life. Again, I put myself in that position because I have a very young family, and it could have been me, it could have been any of us here. And I ask myself, I mean, this morning coming here, I saw my son Jerry, and I can imagine, I mean, it's for any parent, it is the last thing you want your children or your wife to go through. I mean, and that is why, in that vein, we commend government for setting up a 500,000 Ghana cedi fund. However, I mean, if you're a parent and you want to give your child a certain standard of life, which I believe Captain Mahama or Major Mahama would have wanted for his children, we need to go beyond 500,000 Ghana cedis. 500,000 Ghana cedis in a seed fund may not in itself alone, just left like that, be enough to see these children through to a decent university degree. However, if we're able to, be it by executive instrument or something of that nature, bind successive governments to ensuring that a year from now, I mean, or 6 months from now, we don't forget about this family. And then maybe it is only when 29th May comes, we just do a remembrance and people pay lip service to it and we're gone. I mean, the news cycle in Ghana is very short. In fact, this has survived the news cycle, a number of news cycles, because of the peculiar nature of it. But it could easily get forgotten, and that family could get forgotten. Acts of violence against men in uniform in this country did not start today. It did not start today. It's something that has always been there. This incident has made former 7 officers of the Ghana Army put their testimonies out of the kinds of mob action that went on against men of the armed forces from as far back as President Rawlings's time, and even before. You understand me? It happened under President Kufuor, it happened under Professor Mills, it's happened now. Should we let it continue? As a people, we must begin to ask ourselves this question. Okay, we always condemning the military when the military goes high-handed, but we must give them their due. You know, the military of men in uniform, they take a certain oath to make the rest of us live a normal life, whilst their lives are never normal. And so these are things that we must be grateful for, and we must be thankful to them for their service. I keep saying that until and unless we begin to celebrate people who sacrifice for this nation, it will not be worth it. You see the United States and somebody says, I served in the Marines or I served in the Army, and people thank him for his service. He gets a special benefit. We don't have that system in Ghana. And so people don't value the service and sacrifice of our armed men. We just want to ask the police and military high command to ensure that full justice is delivered in this case. And the AG's department, please, that animal called Noli Prosequi, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear it in this matter. Nobody should proffer the wrong charges. And again, Honorable, I think that this is something that Parliament must look at. That we are hearing from the AG's department that they are finding it difficult to determine what charges to level against the people. Because if there's a fear that if you level murder against many of them, being able to determine the mens rea and actus reus will become a difficulty in court. And so a good lawyer could get them off. We need to begin to see if we need, as a nation, as a deterrent, to put in place legislation against mob action that will have specific punishment that will be a deterrent. These are things that we need to start looking at as a country.
Roland, I don't think the AG should have a problem with this matter, especially with the evidence before it. What kind of mens rea or actus reus must you prove?
In the case of the assemblyman, for example, he's not on the video.
You see, your intention to invite the late major and the reaction from the community, you could be charged for.
Instigated by you.
Yes. Everything has to be proven. Could be either through circumstantial evidence. So I don't think the AG has a problem in dealing with this group. So, Roland, the AG must be firm, deal with this group because they've brought the nation to its knees, and I don't think they must have any excuses in saying that they don't have. They cannot profile the right charges in this matter. They must be seen to be dealing with them in accordance with law, but in a fair and fast manner, because a lot of people have lost patience and cannot wait for the slow track approach to go on. I must say that they are doing their best, but people want to see a very quick outturn of this matter.
There's one thing though, the president, after visiting the family, when he visited the family, announced a trust fund. A concern, for example, personally I have, and I think that I've spoken to a number of people, though limited, is that we've had a number of incidents in which, from the days of Kwame Nkrumah, and there's supposed to be some restitution or some kind of trust fund or some funding for victims of such incidents, and they never get to have those benefits beyond the promised governments that gave them.
I don't think this will happen under the MPP administration, because the military held a Durbar which was addressed by the Chief of Defense Staff, a gentleman, General Aqua. The military is a very organized institution. They respect whatever they pronounce. So I think they will have certain structures in place to ensure that whatever government has promised to do, it does. It could be through their budget or special fund, contingency funds that they will set up to ensure that whatever government has promised, government will honor. Secondly, I think the defense minister is also a young man who wouldn't want the family of this gentleman suffer from unrealistic or unfulfilled promises. I'm sure Dominic Nitu, Honorable MP Bimbila, will ensure that whatever his ministry has to do to ensure that government's promises, whether during his tenure as minister, his successor, or whoever comes to take over as Minister of Defense, will ensure that this promise that President Akufo-Addo and his government has made is fulfilled. And I can tell you on authority that government is very serious on this matter. And wouldn't want to incur the wrath of the military or anybody in the service. My colleague talked about low morale in terms of incentives. This is a government that has come into being and is trying to improve upon the conditions of service. You recall the payment of personnel in Mali, increases in their allowances and what have you. No government does everything to the satisfaction of everybody. But you look at steps that government is taking and you are reassured that given the opportunity, government will be able to do a lot more for the military. And I believe under Nitiwul and General Akwa and the military high command, a lot more will be done to ensure that our military officers are well taken care of, and throughout the, it will be replicated within the security services of this country. They ought to know that they have a government that cares about them and everything to boost their morale, to be able to deliver so that they don't go out there and be lynched and to go out there and to go and ask for pittance from the poor citizen to incur all these insults and negativity that we hear about the security service.
All right. Let's move the subject. We're talking the subject of bonds and
St. George's bond.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether it's the minority raising.
Right. Do I have the power to issue bonds?
And at St. George, I know that the finance minister is expected to appear before the House today.
Yeah.
The minority spokesperson on finance, Kese Latoforsen, had been speaking on the subject, especially saying that all needed documentation and explanations need to be brought before Parliament. Based on why he's there, etc. Can you just give us some further clarification on all that?
Well, I must state that this government came to power on the back of huge promises. Huge promises. One key one was the fact that we had money in this country. The vice president, now then running mate, said he had been deputy governor at the Bank of Ghana. He knew that there was money in the country. We didn't need to borrow, and that the Mahama administration was borrowing the country into a ditch and needlessly borrowing. And that when this government came into office, they were not going to borrow. They were going to rather clean up what they had termed as mess in the system and use that resource to develop the country. Now they come into office, and in less than 6 months, they're all over the place borrowing and crowding out private capital. And in this particular case, in instance, the circumstances surrounding the bond, the issuance of a $2.25 billion US bond, can best be said to be bizarre. And again, if you look at the Constitution is clear that every financial transaction of an international nature must come before the Parliament of Ghana. You know, this bond, there's several questions we've asked. First and foremost, when bonds are going to be...
Is it not a local
issued,
bond? It's not a bond that was a domestic bond?
It's not a local, it's not a domestic bond.
Or because...
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
The bond was issued as a foreign denominated bond in the US dollar currency. The bond is going to be serviced every year and retired finally after 15 years in US dollars. The bond is not the Franklin Templeton, who bought 95% of the bond, is not going to be taking Ghanaian cedis. The transfers to Franklin Templeton from the Bank of Ghana are going to be done in forex, US dollars. So what happens is the calculation of interest, which comes about 400 million every year, is going to be calculated 400 million US dollars. CD is going to be sought, converted at the Bank of Ghana, and FT done to Franklin Templeton in US dollars. So tell me how that's the Ghana CD bond. When CD denominated bonds are issued and they are bought on the local market, what happens is you have an account domiciled in Ghana. Your account is not domiciled outside Ghana, it's domiciled in Ghana. And so what happens is if you are due your dividends or your installment payments, what happens is the Bank of Ghana, the Finance Ministry authorizes the Bank of Ghana to transfer to your Ghanaian account, which is a CD transfer from Bank of Ghana to your corresponding bank. In this case, Franklin Templeton's corresponding bank is a foreign bank holding a US dollar account. So every time we are going to send money, we have to transfer it, convert it into dollars and transfer dollars, not CDs. They don't spend CDs in the US. And so when they tell us that it is a local denominated bond, they are throwing dust in the eyes of Ghanaians. It's a falsehood. That is how come and you sit down and you ask yourself, how can you go and borrow 2.25 billion? And in 15 years, you are paying almost 9 billion. Almost 9 billion. What is the, and they told us they were smart. So for me, I want to see the documents come. The finance ministry should come and do full disclosure. I mean, again, you know that it is standard process that when government is engaging in any such activity, the government will engage its chief legal advisor, who happens to be the Attorney General. When Attorney General was written to at first instance, the Attorney General said, in fact, when she was first interviewed by City FM, a sister radio station, she made it clear that she knew absolutely nothing about the bond. She was not engaged in any form or shape. And the Attorney General is head of the AG's department. So if the Deputy Attorney General was consulted, he could not have given legal advice without consulting his boss. So clearly nobody at the Attorney General was consulted. Subsequent to that, lawyer Adawudu, a private legal practitioner, wrote to the Attorney General. She responded in the same vein that she's unaware, she has absolutely no facts about this case. Again, does that not breach or flout any of our standard operating procedures? Again, when you're issuing such bonds, the regulator of the bond market is the Securities and Exchanges Commission of Ghana. As we speak now, this government, by virtue of what they intended to do with the bond, has decided not to constitute a board for the SEC. As we speak now, there's no board for the Securities and Exchange Commission.
And you are saying it's deliberate?
Oh, absolutely deliberate. Because if the SEC was there, the SEC would have raised red flags about this bond. You don't open a bond for 5 hours. Effectively for 5 hours.
What should be the minimum or maximum?
Oh, the last bond, they recently floated a 3-year bond for 800 million, which was undersubscribed. Because investors are afraid of investing in Ghanaian bonds now. So it was undersubscribed. They didn't get the 800 million they were looking for. They got about 730 something and took 705 out of it. Go and check the time duration I was open for. There's a window. Most times you open these bonds for 21 days.
That is, you are talking about what should be the usual.
That is the usual. That is done by the same Ministry of Finance and Bank of Ghana.
But it's not untoward if it's done 5 hours, supposedly.
You see, if in raising 800 million, you open it for days, close to 7 days, but to raise 2.25.
But if you have it subscribed, why do you keep opening the window?
So that is why we are saying that this whole plan, this whole bond was a private placement. It was not an open bond.
You are saying that it was
private placement.
It was done for the convenience of
absolutely
an interested party.
Absolutely. And there are several questions to ask, which when the finance minister brings his document, some of which we'll begin to ask.
Okay.
Which company insured this bond? Which company carried out the insurance policy?
The bond?
Oh, we will see. We'll see if it's a company that is called Enterprise or something. We'll all find out.
Well, we'll come to that subject, sir, because so your comment on this as well. The minority seem to be going on this tangent with you. They don't just want to let it fly.
Well,
just evaporate into.
Very much so, because it's their job to scrutinize every business of government.
You think they are just doing their job?
They are doing absolutely their job.
I won't say legitimate concerns, but some
they're legitimate.
concerns.
What do you mean by they're not legitimate?
I won't get to know whether they're legitimate.
I'm telling you they're legitimate.
We leave
from your perspective.
Legitimacy or whatever issues they raise with this matter to the good people of this country, industry players, and to the investor community. One, my colleague said the Attorney General said she knew nothing about this bond. Who responded to the charges against the Finance Minister, Ashraj? Wasn't it a document from the Attorney General? So the AG, if it's not seized with some particular facts at a particular time, wouldn't issue a statement or comment on it.
But wasn't it intriguing? It doesn't strike
Listen,
you
Roland,
as...
if you come to me and said, oh, I've heard about this bond, what are your views? And I tell you that I'm not seized with the facts at that very moment. That doesn't mean I'm not going to be briefed or given the relevant documents.
That's not what the Attorney General said when she was first interviewed.
The AG has filed an official response on behalf of government at the Shraj. The Finance Minister is coming to brief Parliament per a half-hour motion filed by the minority in Parliament today. They're asking for documents and other disclosures which the Finance Minister will present to Parliament today. Secondly, there's no fraud in this transaction. Thirdly, you talk about issuance of bond, Securities Commission, and what have you. You recall that the former finance minister during the NDC administration, Setekpe, went to the international capital market to raise over $1.5 billion. They were able to raise $1 billion. By the 500, they had to come and raise it on the domestic market. You recall? Did it go through the Securities Commission? Did it come to Parliament as a loan for approval? These are these are matters that are before the general public. It doesn't happen anywhere. Setekpe never brought the $500 million that he raised domestically before Parliament. Neither did he go to the Securities Commission, which had a board at the time, for approval. So why are we trying to mix the issues? The Minister of Finance at every point in time has the power to raise domestic bonds, CD or dollar denominated, to restructure Ghana's debt, to ensure that it gives the government of the day the fiscal space to borrow and to give also the private sector the space to go and borrow at very competitive rates. That is what the finance minister has done. And I see no wrong with that transaction. People may have their own issues because of where we stand on the political divide. You can raise your issues based on the transactions done by the finance minister, but there's no fraudulent dealings in this.
So how would you
bond
describe
issue.
all the concerns, very intriguing concerns that the NDC seem to be raising?
Well, as a minority, they have to raise concerns. The concerns will be answered adequately by the finance minister, who describes their motion and whatever issues that they've raised with regards to this bond as bogus.
You spoke to him?
You didn't read about it?
I'm asking.
Yeah, you
It's
should
not
have.
about what I read.
You should have, because I also read the official response from the finance ministry. There's nothing wrong with what the finance minister did with regards to this bond. It happened under Setekpe. He raised $500 million domestically without bringing it to Parliament, without sending it to the Securities Commission. So why Ken Ofriata?
Okay. So subsequently, your side of the house, you're raising some conflict of interest issues. And you try to rope in enterprise.
Some is not providing any document to that effect.
I haven't mentioned. I said
he mentioned
enterprise something. Enterprise something.
Yes.
I didn't say enterprise group. Please.
Why is that?
Be very cautious when you're quoting me. I didn't say enterprise group. I said setting enterprise something.
So why is that?
Sam is running away.
No, I'm not running. I'm being.
He's being cautious.
Yeah, lawyer, you know what I'm doing. You see, Honorable Boma misses the point. When Seth borrowed 500 on the local market, it was a local bond. It wasn't a foreign transaction. So he didn't have to come to Parliament. But when he was going to
raised 500 million Ghana cedis or 500
million dollars.
No, but you see, that was a local transaction. When he was going to seek the foreign bond, did he not bring it to Parliament?
That he had to.
Fantastic.
But this is a local bond.
Who says it's a local bond?
Because it's issued in.
Who says it is a local bond?
It's a local bond.
And let me ask you something. If they want to push and say it's a local bond, then you can arrive at only one conclusion.
Right.
Our finance minister is substandard and incompetent.
Oh.
Absolutely.
Why?
He's
Why?
substandard and incompetent.
Why?
When he granted a
That's
press
not correct.
interview. Oh wait, when he granted a press interview on why he went for the 2.25 billion bond, he said we had short-term financing that he needed to refinance.
Yes.
Short-term obligations. Fantastic. Short-term obligations are 91 and 182, 90 and 182 days
T-bills.
T-bills.
Yes.
This was on the 17th of April. On the 17th of April, the T-bill rate for 90 days was 16.3%. The T-bill rate for 182 days was 16.75%. So the finance minister had the option of rolling it over.
And at what rate did
He'll roll it over at the same at the T-bill rate of 16.3 and 16.75%.
So
our finance minister goes for a 15-year facility, which is a longer-term facility at 19.7%. Is that not incompetence? Is that not substandard? I mean, if I'm supposed to pay something now, if I can roll something over, I owe you 100 Ghana cedis, and you want it today, and I'm supposed to pay you with an interest of 16 cedis 50 pesos, or 16 cedis 30 pesos on the 100 Ghana cedis. It means I'm supposed to give you 116 cedis 30 pesos in 3 months. Then I say to you that, oh, you know what? No, and you say, oh, if you don't have it, I can roll it over again
so
for
you're
you
saying, well, he
at the same
cost
16.
the state?
He's brought cost financial loss to the state to the tune of $330 million per year for 15 years. What they have done is effectively said, oh, instead of me to just go back to Patrick and say, Patrick, you know what, give me another 3 months where I'll pay the 16 cedis, 50 pesos on the 100 Ghana cedis. And I'm doing this for our viewers to understand, because maybe the percentages and things get them confused. I leave Patrick and come to you, Roland, and say, Roland, you know what, I need to pay Patrick 116 Ghana cedis in 3 months. But no, I would rather take for 15 years. Let me be paying you for 15 years, 119 Ghana cedis.
That's not correct.
119 cedis, 50 pesos.
This is voodoo economics.
I mean, it's either a screw has gotten loose in my head, or I clearly do not understand.
So
what
you're saying this is deliberate?
I am saying that this is either a private placement with gross conflict of interest, where there's insider trading on the part of Franklin Templeton in connivance with our finance minister, or our finance minister is grossly incompetent and fully substandard. Look, I'll tell
Roland,
you what, my honorable MP, please, I beg you. MP, please, I beg you. He spoke about the Attorney General. We all listened to the Attorney General. The Attorney General told us she didn't know zilch about the thing. She didn't tell us that she was versed with the facts and would not tell us. And honorable, the standard procedure is not for the finance ministry to go and engage in a transaction before they come and brief the Attorney General. If I'm your client and I'm going to do a business, am I not supposed to seek your legal counsel before I engage in a transaction? Do I go and engage in a transaction when there's problem and I'll come to you? Won't you charge me more?
You believe in client confidentiality, don't you? Why must the AG disclose certain facts when she hasn't sat down with it?
Client confidentiality doesn't come in here. The government has a duty to the taxpayer.
No.
Yes.
To give information.
So it's a different thing if the Attorney General tells us that I'm citing client confidentiality and so I will not disclose. That is different from saying that I do not know, I was not consulted.
I haven't seen any such statement.
Oh, that's what she said.
Before I go to Patrick,
we heard it on CTFM.
Samuel, not George. Before I go to Patrick, though, I would want to ask you, on what premise did you put together, whether circumstantial or not, or try to figure out how this could become a conflict of interest situation or a scenario of insider trading?
Okay.
Insider trading is fraudulent.
Absolutely, and that is the grounds of our petition.
And it happens only on the stock market.
That is the conditions of our grounds for the petition to the US SEC. Why? Franklin Templeton is not under the jurisdiction of Ghana. It's a US registered entity, and they come under the sole jurisdiction of the US SEC. And the US government or the US state has a Foreign Trade Corrupt Practices Act, which frowns fully on insider trading. Even as we speak now, Franklin Templeton is before the US SEC for a similar issue in other countries in Africa. You understand me? And so we've just gone there to do what is legally permitted by us. What raises the issues of conflict of interest and insider trading is the fact that you have a gentleman who is on the board of Franklin Templeton called one Mr. Travagani. Now, Mr. Trevor Travagani is on the board of Franklin Templeton and also serves on the board of a company that used to be wholly owned by our finance minister and is currently owned by his wife.
No.
Oh, his wife is on the board of
Travagani
Wholly owned
says,
and sitting on the board are not the same.
Travagani is a non-executive director of a company that a finance minister founded or used to own.
Absolutely.
Okay, owns a share in that company that
Yes.
that Travagani sits on as a non-executive director. But it's so what happens to that?
You see, so you just buttressed my fact.
Well, true.
That Travagani has certain business relationship, and at the time the finance minister used to be actively involved in the running of
His business.
Travagani was on that board. They have personal relationship and business relationship.
Perceived?
His wife.
You are perceiving that they
how can
people could sit on the board and not be friends.
No, listen.
You are not saying that. You are not saying
that company was
You are not
founded
saying
by,
that anybody.
I won't put anybody on the board of a company I own. Listen, Trevor Travagani did not buy shares of the company to make him sit on the board.
What did he do?
He was nominated by the founder. The founder put together the board. He owned the company and he put together a board of directors with his wife holding his interest.
He doesn't own the company. He owns a percentage in that company.
He's just a shareholder.
Oh, look. Let me tell you something. We can play the ostrich in this country.
Do you know the shareholding structure of that group? You don't know.
We can play the ostrich in this country. If you mention certain companies, we know who is behind them. If you mention multimedia, we know there's Kwesi Chum. There's a board of directors, yes or no?
Sure.
Fantastic. But when you mention multimedia, what's the first name that comes to our mind? It's not Kwesi Chum. Do we go and look for the board of directors?
You have to.
When you mention enterprise insurance or you mention data bank, what name comes to your mind? Is it Trevor Travagani or Mr. Ken Oforiatta?
Ken Oforiatta.
So what are we talking about? Let's not play because
Sam George,
those are the individuals who started the enterprise.
Let's respect corporate governance.
As they grew, then those individuals found the people who sit on the board of multimedia. You think Mr. Kwesi Chum doesn't know the people? They just came from nowhere and then he allowed them to sit on the board without him personally having trust in the ability to manage the multimedia.
But in this instance,
Roland, Sam is mixing.
Wait. But in this instance, the company that's the finance minister helped found is not the majority shareholder or doesn't own fully the company you're talking about. On whose board that Travagani sits?
That's enterprise.
Yes, it's not owned fully by Databank.
Whether it is owned fully or partially, does the foreign because they have an interest.
Then they contradict your argument.
It doesn't contradict my. In fact, it buttresses my argument. It buttresses my argument. That look, the two of them have had business dealings. They've sat on the same board before.
It's a perception you have.
No, it's not a perception. And then you see,
how can you prove that?
Okay, and then I'll tell you what. Franklin Templeton has been buying Ghana bonds since 2007. They started buying,
so this is not the first time. You agree?
And I'm building a case with that. They started buying bonds under the S.Y. Kufuor administration, President Kufuor administration.
And then bought
under President Mills, bought under President Mahama.
Yes.
And in 10 years, from 2007 to 2017, the complete portfolio of Ghana bonds that Franklin Templeton held on their books was 2 billion. In 10 years, all the bonds they bought under President Kufuor, under President Mills, under President Mahama, in 10 years, the total portfolio was worth 2 billion. Then, Mr. Travagani's friend and business partner becomes finance minister, and in one transaction, they buy 2.25 billion. And you're telling me there's nothing in there. And you look at it, and you look at in facts I've given to you that government of Ghana has been borrowing on the dollar market at a rate not exceeding 10%. At a rate not exceeding 10%. And we do a dollar-denominated bond for a friend of our finance minister, a business partner of our finance minister, and peg it at 19.75%.
Why do you make the conclusion
that? You tell me that we should sit down and clap our hands.
Sam George, why do you make
Roland?
Why do you make the conclusion that this was made for the friend of the finance minister?
In 5 hours,
Roland,
they put together a bid
Roland,
and bought 95%.
I think.
Roland, no, you just think far. That in 10 years, the company has seen Ghana's bond worth 2 billion.
This is a very serious program being listened by serious analysts.
Absolutely.
So, if you are talking about certain facts, you need to buttress it with evidence. You say the finance minister owns majority shares in Enterprise.
I didn't
this
say
is
that.
false.
Council, I didn't say that.
We all heard you.
No, I didn't say that. The host is
his
here.
wife sits on this board.
Yes, does she not?
Controlled by the finance minister. 3, that everybody who sits on the board of that group, the finance minister, influences it. And you even
he knows them.
use multimedia as an example.
Absolutely.
You cannot prove that. Please,
No,
I allowed you to speak for more than 10 minutes.
You didn't allow me.
I did. I didn't. Whatever you assert, you must be able to prove it. You've not been able to tell us even the shareholding structure of that enterprise group. You started by saying enterprise something something. Now you landed by saying enterprise group. If I ask you, what is the shareholding structure of enterprise group? You wouldn't know. You wouldn't even know whether there are certain institutions that own shares in that group, for which they'll be able to nominate certain people to represent them on the board. It could be that the finance minister holds, let's say, 3%. He's resigned from that group.
He's resigned from his interest.
Yes.
He's resigned his interest in his funding company.
Yes.
That has a share.
Which is known, which he told the whole country during his vetting. Minority leader and everybody on the appointments long ago.
Before the,
so what kind of mischief are you trying to smear him?
You consider this mischief?
I think so. Listen, number 2, you are talking about 19 point something borrowing. Over that period, not per annum.
No, it is per annum.
Oh, listen.
No, let's not mislead the Ghanaian people. It is per annum, honorable.
Even if it's per annum,
it is per annum.
19.5% divided by 12. That is what we are talking about. You went onto the international market, borrowed 1 billion at 10.75%.
Per annum.
Per annum. Over $1 billion.
And you have gone for 2.25 billion.
Over how many years?
15 years. Which means we get to pay more.
Listen.
Oh, no, you're missing. The economics, this is not law, this is economics.
Listen.
You are paying more interest because over 15 years.
10.75% for 1 billion over 1 year. And
we can do actual figures. Let's do actual figures.
You're not the only one who knows.
10% of 1 billion is 100 million.
Listen.
So you are paying 100 million per annum.
Yes.
As interest.
Over
10 years.
So
100, 10 million. This is very simple. 100 million.
Let me make my point.
No. He's misleading the public.
I'm not missing any point.
He said there are serious people watching the show.
And you are saying that Ken went for 2.25 billion at 19.5.
Yes.
You come and prove it. He will give you all the documents.
So he didn't go for it at 19.5.
Listen. You come to Parliament today. You come and give the explanation you are talking about and misleading the public that he's caused financial loss to the state. He's done insider trading, for which you have to prove it if you are called upon to do. Franklin Templeton influenced him. He's got friends on the board and what have you. These are all calculated attempts by the minority to smear the finance minister.
To malign his integrity.
They know
this has
that
nothing to do with
I'm not borrowing any words from you, but I'm saying that
it's not borrowing words from me.
I'm saying that
you are playing mischief.
I'm saying that it's a whole game that the minority is playing. We said that the NDC government was corrupt. They want to insulate themselves from the corrupt tag that the NPP tagged them or spoke to the good people of Ghana about. They are on a tangent to cleanse themselves from all the corrupt activities that Ghanaians are witnessing.
But Patrick, let me ask you this, okay? Is it not intriguing? Is it not interesting that we have somebody who is a finance minister, has vast business interests, both local and abroad, but particularly in this instance, a transaction for which usually you have a window open for several hours, if not for days, but this time is restricted to some few hours, is bought by somebody, or
please let
me continue. It's purchased by an entity that has an interest, or has an individual that has an interest in a company for which the individual has a percentage in a company that he had found is heading all this. at the end of the day, don't you think, interestingly, somebody will raise questions?
Roland, it's genuine for somebody to raise questions, but whether those questions affect the person's credibility or the entire transaction, whether the entire transaction is marred in any corrupt practice or dealing, is what we are talking about. Kenneth Wrighter could be a shareholder in the enterprise group. Everybody knows about it. The fact that Sam George says that the window for the said transaction was for 5 hours cannot be proven. It's not correct. If I open an auction and say that within 21 days, come and do A, B, C, D, and you decide to come at the 21st day, and I decide to go and transact that business within 24 hours, would I have violated any laws? It says no. Within so and so days, or within 10 hours, within 24 hours. If the transaction were not to be a good one, would you have had a serious group like Franklin Templeton flying down here to participate? You alluded to the fact that this is not the first time this group is participating in a transaction in Ghana. You started by saying that under President Kufuor, under President Mills, under President Mahama, under President Kufuor, they've been dealing in Ghanaian bonds, and they hold altogether 2.something billion, 2 billion.
Previously.
It means that this group has a track record in buying our bonds.
For 10 years, they buy 2 billion, and then in 24 hours, they buy 2.25
because they see a new administration and they see a new government that they feel they could do better or serious business with.
Because
there's no personal interest. That is your view. You are entitled to it. But you've set up your own investigative machinery from Shraj to Parliament. And it will come to nothing because there's nothing to hide. We have nothing to hide in this transaction. The minister will be on the floor today. He will give you every document that you require. He will give you every answer to this transaction. You allay your fears, and the good people and the investor community have serious confidence in this government and in this administration to ensure that we deliver on our manifesto promise to the good people of this country.
Roland, Sam, you know what? For me, I like to do my figures. If you go and borrow 1 billion at 10% per annum, it means that your interest per annum is $100 million. 100 million. Over a 10-year period, it means you are paying 1 billion in interest, plus the principal. So that gives you 2 billion total facility. Then you go and borrow but if you go and borrow 2.25 billion at 19.5%, it means that your interest per annum is 438,750,000. Now, that figure times 15 years comes to 6,581,250,000. How can you then tell me that this is better than what was done previously?
The question, Roland, is it borrowing? Did government borrow?
What are bonds? Bonds are borrowing. Bonds are instruments of borrowing. Please. Honorable, I beg you.
Don't mix it.
Bonds are instruments of borrowing. When government wants to borrow, government issues a bond as an instrument. The bond is basically hold this bond and show it at any time
over a period
and retrieve your money. It's me borrowing money from you. It's like me saying that I'm borrowing from you and take my house, take the documents for my house and hold it as a bond. So it is borrowing. I mean, let's not even go into that discussion. The bottom line here, which we are establishing,
is that there was fraud.
Look, as far as we are concerned as a minority, we believe and we have asked the U.S. Security and Exchanges Commission to investigate issues of insider trading against Franklin Templeton.
Okay. Can I ask
because the charge there is not against the finance minister.
You've read this.
You see, because I'm coming. Wait. It's important because of some of the presentations or representations that were made by Honorable Boama. The charges of conflict of interest are against Franklin Templeton. Insider trading are against Franklin Templeton. The charges of conflict of interest are against the finance minister.
Which has been responded
you
to.
understand me? It's not been responded to.
Okay,
It's not
Sam,
been responded to.
You can go to
What has
Shraj.
happened
The
at
response is there.
Shraj?
But you
what
are
has happened
refusing
at
to
Shraj-
read.
No.
Sam,
What
let me
has
ask you a
happened at
question.
Shraj is a response from the Attorney General.
Sam, let me ask you a
The charge
question.
of conflict of interest is not against government.
Sam, let me ask
It's
you a
against
question.
the individual, the person.
Sam George, is it not a situation where the minority seems to think a transaction has been undertaken or conducted?
Beautiful.
They circumstantially think that there's something fishy about it. They have no evidence, but rather are calling the protagonist in the whole story to come and give them evidence. Come and explain to us, why is this not an act of some illegality or an untowardness, for which so far in the public domain you seem not to have presented any concrete information or evidence for somebody to believe that what you accuse the finance minister of is really true?
I think that your question is misinformed, respectfully. Because if we had not provided any evidence, I don't think a citizen of this country, Mr. Yaoboja Jemfi, would have been able to, on the back of some of the questions we have raised, written to Shraj. And if there was no substance in the issues we have raised, Shraj would have asked. Shraj did not just automatically, when Shraj received the petition, they said they were going to consider and find out if there was any merit in the request before they would.
Have you read the response?
And so once
Raj
has done an evaluation of the issues that were raised by Mr. Yaoboja Jemfi, which are conterminous with the issues that the minority is raising, and they have determined that there are questions to be answered, it cannot be said to be that we have no basis.
So this is what I meant. You said that somebody has a relationship with somebody. So if you want to provide the public with proper information, you provide phone records of some level of communication, okay? Or perhaps you provide some email details of some level of communication. You provide perhaps video footages of some meeting somewhere, maybe we're undertaking at JFK airport or something of the sort.
You are oversimplifying the issue, Roland. That is why
so far you're just
the
raising
minority.
questions.
No, listen. The minority has put together. Look, if you take even the documentation from Franklin Templeton, go and check what's the address that is listed as their Ghana address and see whose address that is. Then you would understand some of the issues. And you see, for me, I don't even want to go into too much of the detail. I think I've even gone into quite a substantial amount of detail. But I'm saying, go to Franklin Templeton, their Ghana address, see whose address that is in Ghana, and then you will understand the issues of conflict of interest that the minority has raised.
The Ghana address of Franklin Templeton, who is it for?
That government, the minority has raised.
Who is it for?
Oh, don't worry. The SEC is seized with those. The SEC in the US is seized with those facts, and those are some of the issues on which we are raising the conflict of interest and insider trading case. So for me, if you think that there is no issue, if your mother is dead, and you say your mother is not dead, she's sleeping, in the night when we are all going for food from our mothers, you sleep. You
all right. So let's. Let me look at this before I go. The Kintampo water disaster, which claimed lives on March, has been described as an act of God. A report presented to Parliament has revealed. Why the Minister of Tourism say it's just an act of God when, well, the questions have been raised about warnings that could have been given if we had proper, perhaps, tour guides or security people who had well been trained, etc.
Well, the minister said this when she was before the floor yesterday, when she came before Parliament yesterday to answer questions. I think a question was posed by Honorable Okujeto Ablakwa on the steps that government was taking after the Kintampo Waterfalls disaster. Clearly, an investigative team was put in place to go into the details, and that was a report presented to her. So she came to the floor of Parliament and answered the questions in that regard. Government is putting in place a lot of measures, including training of tour guards, and putting in place certain measures to forestall the reoccurrence of such an incident. I believe that tourism and other related activities and other related sites, let me put it this way, Kintampo tourist waterfall and other tourist attractions has to be given the needed attention in terms of infrastructure, security, and regular audits to ensure that everybody or tourists who go there to enjoy life are well protected and ensure that early warning signals and good technological mechanisms are put in place to be able to detect some of these issues. These are some of the answers that the minister gave when she appeared on the floor yesterday.
George?
I was disappointed. Honorable Katrina Feku is a very good friend of mine, but I was disappointed in the answer she gave. I mean, to tell me that deliberate action by individuals constitute an act of God. I do not know if the invisible forces have become God, so that their action can be alluded to as an act of God.
So the invisible forces broke the trees.
There were trained tour guides at the Kintampo Waterfalls, trained with Ghanaian taxpayers' money. When this government took over and the culture of impunity and the democracy of lawlessness took over, starting from the Flagstaff House, where right at the president's home and seat of government, a senior police officer was molested and attacked in the full glow of everybody, and the minister tells us, of Interior also tells us that they can't find the person. From there, it empowered people. They went into a courtroom and sacked the sitting judge. Then they went to Kintampo and sacked the Waterfalls people there. The train guides, they were sacked by the invisible forces, who took over the place and started revenue collection. You see, people say, oh, the trees fell on their own. If the train tour guides were there,
the trees
they would have insisted that the children should not be in the water at the time, because that is part of their training. The invisible forces, their training was done by the mercenaries, the 3 mercenaries from South Africa. They didn't teach them how to take care of tourists and all of that. No, they were taught how to handle arms and how to beat judges and beat senior police officers. That's what they were taught, and how to collect money. That's what they were taught by the South African 3, the mercenaries from South Africa. That is how come when the invisible forces were in charge of Kintampo Waterfalls, there was no trained person to insist that these young Ghanaians, who could have become MPs like myself and him in the near future, should not have been in the water. If the train guides were there, the children would not have been in the water. The trees would have fallen, but they would not have killed. They would not have killed anybody. And so as a result, except the minister is telling us that now the invisible forces are God. So well, I believe they are in the NPP, because they determine what happens in the NPP. I mean, the invisible forces can do anything.
So George is still campaigning.
But you see, the bottom line is, the minister made a very telling statement yesterday in her response. She said an audit was going on of 6 tourist sites. That's problematic. You see,
why?
When issues like the Kintampo Waterfall happen, you saw the outcry in the country. We need to audit our places. We are paying lip service to it again. No,
we are not.
It is lip service. We do not have 6 tourist sites in Ghana.
Listen,
we have more.
So you're saying that he has to be extended.
Why are we only auditing 6?
It
is an insult to the memory of the 19 young men and women who died.
Samuel George is a member of parliament for
the campaign platform.
And Patrick Yaubuama is a member of parliament for Kaikui Central, Deputy Minister for Water and Sanitation. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Sam George is still on the campaign platform.
Let me wish my mother a happy birthday. Ma, happy birthday. My mom turned 60 today.
Wow. Congratulations to her.
Okay. Your son is still on the campaign mood.
All right. So later tonight, JoyNews will premiere a new program, The Hard Truth, and the show interviews top-notch personalities on their take on national issues. And host of the show, Akusia Kunedu Asante Samuel, so will be joining us for brief breakfast discussions next.